So it's the start of a very exciting day. And I am Palden, your moderator for this session. And again, it's an absolute pleasure to be here with all of you. I kind of stalked most of you. The works you did, it's kind of scary to be honest. You've been making a lot of impacts in your community, which makes me feel a bit insecure. But y'all been doing good. To kick this off, to kick the APFSD Youth Forum off, before we dive in, I think it's important that we check in with each other. Again, how are we feeling today? Oh my God. Okay, so since we had the tea break just now, a quick show of hands. Who's had coffee already? All right, we have a decent number of coffee drinkers. And for those who haven't, don't worry. We have a series of sessions lined up. Hopefully that will excite you. I'm not sure, but it is exciting for me. So don't worry about it. Just anticipate excitement. All right. Today we're here to convene, collaborate, and I'd like to reiterate, craft a regional youth call to action for the APFSD 2025. And our goal for the next 3 days, again, I'd like to reiterate, is to come together, learn, and collectively draft a powerful youth to action because, again, your voice is vital in shaping the future, our future. Now, before we start, let me quickly share what this session will look like. We'll hear from 4 amazing speakers, each with 7 minutes to share their insights. Once all the speakers have presented, we'll have a time for Q&A session, so keep those questions ready. Now, I'd like to call on the dais all the speakers. We have 2 speakers in person, 2 speakers online. So I'd like to call on the dais the speakers. A huge round of applause as well. First up, we have Dr. Felipe Paula, who is the Director General of the National Youth Institute of Uruguay since 2020. He previously served as a deputy mayor in Montevideo from 2015 to 2020, and as a clinical doctor and pediatric resident at the Pereira Rosell Pediatric Hospital from 2017 to 2020. Up next, we have Juliet Nicole Braslow from UNESCAP. Juliet Braslow is a Sustainable Development Officer at UNESCAP, coordinating activities for the 2030 Agenda implementation in Asia and the Pacific, including preparation for the HLPF. She previously worked on the Asia-Pacific Plan of Action on space application for sustainable development. Our third speaker, Joy Hernandez, is the Director for Communication and Advocacy at ITUC Asia Pacific, coordinating programs on just transition, development cooperation, and SDGs. She is also a co-chair of APRSEM and the focal point for its worker and trade unions. And our last speaker, Sivananthi Thaninthiran, is the ED of Arrow. Arrow, as you know, is a regional feminist organization, and she has been advocating for SRHR with a focus on the ICPD POA and its intersection with climate change, food security, and migration. So now to kick things off, we will have a video by Dr. Felipe Paula, who again is the United Nations Secretary General for Youth Affairs, who will be setting the tone for the APFST Youth Forum 2025.
My name is Felipe Polier, and I'm the United Nations Assistant Secretary General for Youth Affairs, and I lead the newly established United Nations Youth Office. The core focus of our mandate is to ensure that more young people are meaningfully included in decision-making spaces at every level, ensuring that all youth voices and perspectives are heard. Today, there are 1.9 billion young people around the world, with half of the global population under 30 years old. Nearly 90% of them live in developing countries. Yet, despite this reality, young people are still often left out of important policy making and decision making processes. When young people are excluded, we lose out on energy and on their ideas. And this is a loss for all the people today and for future generations. Harnessing the full potential of youth is essential to building resilient and inclusive societies. Building on the successful foundation laid by the Pact for the Future in 2025, we must deepen our commitment to ensuring that young people are not merely consulted, but they are co-creators and partners in shaping policies that impact their present and their future. In the Asia Pacific, youth face unique challenges and opportunities. Climate change, digital transformation, and urbanization are reshaping the region. These challenges are large and complex, but they also present opportunities for young people who have the creativity, the resilience, the innovation, and the entrepreneurial spirit to address these key challenges. However, to unlock the full potential of all young people, we must ensure that they have access to the skills, to the mentorship, and funding to design the networks they need to focus on promoting STEM education, science innovation, and digital entrepreneurship amongst young people also empower them to develop evidence-based solutions. Across the Asia Pacific, we are seeing young people making an impact on achievement of the SDGs in areas such as health, such as well-being and gender equality. We must work to provide opportunities for young people to come together to work on shared challenges. This is because the most urgent challenges, like climate change and the conservation of the world's oceans, seas, and marine, are shared challenges. Addressing them requires collaboration across borders, across cultures, and across sectors. No single country, organization, or institution can tackle these issues alone. Regional youth forums like this one are crucial because they bring together the best young minds and innovative thinkers from around the region to share ideas and to form partnerships that accelerate the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. It also serves as an example for other regions on the criticality to engage young people in the discussions that will affect their present and the future of their communities. Let us seize this moment to highlight that we need to collaborate, that we need to innovate, and we need to work together towards a better future, one where young people are at the forefront of sustainable, inclusive, and evidence-based solutions for the Sustainable Development Goals. Thank you, and I wish you a very productive discussion.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Felipe.
Dear friends,
Even though he is not here, he is here in spirit. I think this set a pretty much clear tone on how our following days is gonna be, and then it's really great to start with a very positive energy. So up next we have Juliet Nicole Braslow from UNESCAP, who will be highlighting the key themes and goals under review, and will take us through with what lies ahead of this forum. She'll share how young people can actively engage and make a meaningful impact. So over to you, Juliet.
All right, good morning. Oh, good, you had good practice before, you were ready. Okay, so I'm going to use a PowerPoint so you have some visuals, and there also will be some QR codes, so you'll have that information at your fingertips. Your energy and dedication and innovation is really what we need for the sustainable and inclusive future that Dr. Paulier was just speaking to. And I'm going to give you a bit of an overview of the Asia Pacific Forum itself and how it sits within the follow-up and review of the 2030 agenda. All right, so the PowerPoint is there. Okay, next slide, please. As you know, the Asia Pacific Forum is coming up next week, so starting on Tuesday, the 25th, and it has the theme very much linked to this youth forum today. And we are looking at advancing sustainable, inclusive science and evidence-based solutions. I know there's already some solutions out there in the hall that many of you have been dedicated to and working hard on. So we're already starting in this room today and over the next 3 days. The APFSD is a regional preparatory meeting for the high-level political forum that will take place in New York in July this year. And it's at the high-level political forum that the 5 SDGs, those 5 goals that you'll be discussing in the next 3 days, we'll be also discussing at APFSD next week and at the high-level political forum. So this is a regional platform that allows for sharing good practices and lessons, and also includes looking at the voluntary national reviews, bringing the voices from the different constituencies, as well as the different sub-regions in Asia and the Pacific. So next slide. This gives you a bit of the sense of how it works to the follow-up and review of the 2030 agenda. And it starts at the subnational level in your communities, but officially the reporting happens at the national level. So I think some of you may have heard of the voluntary national reviews, which there are 12 countries in the Asia Pacific who are conducting them this year to present in New York on the global stage in July. And this is where the country reviews what's happening in sustainable development and what are the promising prospects for the future. Where should priorities lie? So those of you who are in these national youth alliances, this could be a great opportunity to also engage in the discussion on SDGs at the national level. So feel free to reach out on this. And then we move to the sub-regional level. So every year between September and November, the SCAP colleagues in the sub-regional offices, so we have 5 of them, host forums so that they can have deeper discussions with many different stakeholders on the SDGs under review, the theme of the Asia Pacific Forum. That will then feed into the forum, which happens next week. And that is what is in the regional level. And so this is why you are all here today as well, because we want to have all of your energy, your innovation, and your ideas for priority areas for action to feed into the forum itself. And then taking these to the global stage in July at the high-level political forum. All right, next slide, please. So APFSD is an inclusive forum. It informs, empowers, and supports Asia-Pacific countries in their efforts to achieve the 17 development goals, and helps to identify regional trends, so looking at where are we in the SDGs, and sharing best practices and lessons learned amongst countries and other stakeholders, and convenes many different stakeholder groups, including the UN, also member states, international organizations, civil society organizations, and others whose reflections will feed into the HLPF. So that's at the global level in New York. And stakeholder groups represented by civil society at the forum include, but are not limited to, there are many, but these may be of quite interest to you: children, youth, and adolescents, women, indigenous people, local authorities, farmers, workers and trade unions, peoples with disabilities, and more. So we want to hear your voices. I know you are from the youth and adolescents group, but there may be intersections with some of these others as well. So how can you engage? What are the stakeholder engagement mechanisms for APFSD? You're here in one of them right now today, but we have the call for major groups and other stakeholders that comes out in the fall every year. So it comes out around November before the APFSD the next year. And then the call for the youth forum, which you all knew about, and hopefully will spread the word. And then there's the opportunity, if selected for those, to participate in the Asia Pacific People's Forum that will happen starting on Sunday, and also here in the Youth Forum. So then these provide the preparations to give inputs into the APFSD. So these are some of the formal mechanisms. And I want to talk a little bit about why the Youth Forum is important in the context of APFSD, of the forum itself, because there are hundreds of youth here. We want to hear your voices. We want to be able to include your perspectives and the input from the call to action, which I know you will be working very hard on in the next couple days. And as Sai mentioned, we will be putting on the APFSD site and making sure that the stakeholders at the forum and those that we communicate with have that information. Feeds into the collective statement that will be given at the opening of the forum, as well as some of the statements that will happen during the plenary sessions of the forum. And then beyond, so being able to find ways to help support the country alliances, what happens next with this youth call to action. So the forum provides some of the mechanisms to help collaborate and partner to do that. All right, next slide. So you're here today to also talk about what is the progress of the SDGs in the region and what are the realities you're seeing in your communities and in your organizations. I know you'll dig in much deeper as the days go on and have experts speaking with you about these, but this is a snapshot from the SCAP SDG Progress Report, which was just launched yesterday, looking at the 5 SDGs under review. So you can get a sense of where they stand. The middle line is where we would hope the progress would be if we're on the path to reach them by 2030. So you can see we're not there for any of them. And some of them have a very limited amount of data. So I'm sure that issue will come up in your discussions as well. So this is just a little bit of a teaser, a snapshot, and feel free for more information to check that publication as well. And in the next slide, here are just a few examples from what we see in that progress. You'll be digging in more, but we're looking at, for example, a resource availability for HIV in the Asia Pacific gap, about 64% of what it needs to reach the UNAIDS 2025 target. Another example, only 21% of the seats were held by women in national parliament in 2024. Another one is more than 1 in 5 young adults aged 15 to 24 years were not in education, employment, or training in Asia and the Pacific. And another is that the Asia Pacific region exported an estimated 10.7 million tons of beach litter. So these are pulled out because they link with all 5 of these SDGs under review. I don't want to give all doom and gloom because I know you will have examples of actions that are happening on the ground, ways that you're contributing in your communities, and ideas for action at the national, regional, and global level that we want to capture. But we do have to understand where we are and what the reality is and what the data, when we have it, is telling us. And with that, I want to share there are many opportunities to engage at the forum itself. So after you've spent lots of your energy here, sharing your voices, preparing the call to action, we want to hear it in the forum. We want you to engage. So you can find here the full youth schedule. So there are some who I know will be attending in person, but even if you're only coming online, there are also side events, other discussions where you can join and be a part of the conversations that will happen at the forum as well. So I hope you can check that out and find something or many things that are of interest to keep the momentum that you'll be building in these next days here at the forum. We want to see you there. And my colleague Christian, I think, has been already in touch with many of you. He will be there in person, but he is our youth engagement focal point, and he can answer questions about many of these events, including the Generation Hope Goals event, which we hope you all attend, as it's something that we want to hear your insights, and we are having teams who've developed solutions on the 5 SDGs, sharing their innovations. And so we welcome you to join any and all of these APFSD events. Next slide, please. All right, so I want to thank you, and I also want to encourage you because I know many of you are SDG heroes. And so we are having a campaign ahead of APFSD to highlight the SDG heroes from the community level to the national stage. What are you doing for one SDG, a target, many? And this is going to be on SCAP social media. We already have many coming in, but we want to help amplify your message and share the work that you are doing. So please check it out on the SCAP social media. My colleague Benita is in the back. She can give you more information about it because it's another platform where we can help share your messages. So I want to wish you a wonderful and productive and fun next 3 days here, and also joining us at the forum itself following next week. So thank you very much, and keep up the energy, enthusiasm, and innovation.
Thank you, Juliet, for giving us the roadmap for the forum and to making it super exciting for us to look ahead as well. Up next, we have Joy Quinton Hernandez from APRSEM, who will delve into what's happening at the People's Forum and highlight the APRSEM Development Justice Framework. And this insight will also be a guiding light for our discussions further. So I'd like to request the team to share the video.
Good morning, everyone. It is an honor for me to speak before you today, young leaders, advocates, and change makers from across Asia and the Pacific region, despite only through a video message. This Asia Pacific Youth Forum on Sustainable Development is happening at a crucial moment, a time when our region and the world are at the crossroads. The challenges that we face, such as climate disasters, widening inequality, and shrinking democratic spaces, are intensifying. But what's more important is that the youth have the power to change this trajectory. We are here because we believe in a better future, one that is just, sustainable, and built by the people, for the people. But let me ask you this: are we on track to achieve that future? We are now a decade into the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Yet, despite all the promises made by governments and institutions, progress remains painfully slow. Only 11% of the SDG targets are on track in our region. At this rate, we won't achieve all 17 SDGs until 2062. That's more than 30 years behind schedule. But this is not just about numbers. This is about the real struggles of real people. It's about the workers who still don't earn living wages. It's about communities forced to flee their homes because of climate disasters. It's about the young people who see their future slipping away while corporations and elites continue to profit. And this is not development justice. This is not the future we deserve. Now let's be clear. These failures are not accidental. They are the result of a system that was never designed to work for us. We live under a neoliberal economic model that prioritizes corporate profits over people and the planet. This system drives inequality by concentrating wealth and power in the hands of the few. Furthermore, many systemic barriers exist. A financial system that enriches the rich while leaving developing countries drowning in debt. Climate inaction that puts frontline communities at risk while letting the biggest polluters off the hook. Militarism and conflicts that divert resources away from social justice and sustainable development. Democratic backsliding that silences dissent and makes it harder for youth and civil society to organize. When people push back, they face repression. And across our region, we see shrinking civic spaces, and attacks on activists. The message is clear. The current system is designed to benefit the powerful at the expense of the people. But here's the truth. We are not powerless. That's why platforms like the Asia Pacific Regional CSO Engagement Mechanism are so important. APRSEM is a collective voice for civil society, a platform that brings together grassroots movements and marginalized sectors to fight for a just and sustainable future, to fight for development justice. And it is not controlled by corporations, it is not controlled by governments, it is led by us, the people. APRSEM consists of different organizations, over 600, coming from 5 subregions in Asia and the Pacific, as well as 17 constituencies, including NGOs, women, social and community enterprises, farmers, trade unions and workers, science and technology, indigenous peoples, urban poor, migrants, persons with disabilities, people living with and affected by HIV and AIDS, LGBTQIA+, Asian people, people affected by conflicts and disasters, fisher folks, Dalits, and you, the youth. Through APRSEM, we challenge policies, push for accountability, and ensure that international and multilateral decision-making processes reflect the realities of those affected. APRSEM exists because we refuse to let governments and corporations decide our future without us. And that is exactly why we are organizing the Asia Pacific People's Forum on Sustainable Development on the 23rd and 24th of February to reclaim the development agenda, to shift power away from the elites, and to push for a world where people and the planet come first. The People's Forum is not just a gathering, it is a strategy space, it is a resistance space, and it is a space for movement building. This year, under the theme Change the System, Shift the Power, Reclaim Development Agenda for the People, and advancing development justice in Asia and the Pacific, we aim to expose the barriers preventing sustainable development in our region, strengthen our collective movement for development justice, strategize interventions for the Asia Pacific Forum on Sustainable Development and the High Level Political Forum, and build concrete demands and recommendations to push for real and systemic change. So where do the young people fit in? The answer is everywhere. People are at the forefront of the climate strikes, protests for human rights, and campaigns for economic and social justice. But despite this, the youth are often excluded from decision making, and that has to change. We need to move beyond being token youth voices in sustainability discussions. The youth must be at the center of decision-making and action. This means disrupting business as usual, challenging policies that fuel inequality, exploitation, and environmental destruction. Advancing development justice, which means demanding a system where wealth, power, and resources are equitably distributed. Building alternative models, community-led campaign climate solutions, labor rights campaigns, and new economic paradigms rooted in economic justice and development justice. Mobilizing and strategizing, as well as organizing, strengthening grassroots movements of young persons, indigenous communities, women, LGBTQIA+ groups, as well as other marginalized constituencies, holding governments accountable, demanding real commitments to development justice, and ensuring that multilateral processes serve the people and not corporations. And lastly, strengthening solidarity. This means connecting struggles across borders, across movements, and across generations. As we engage in the People's Forum, We want you to use this space to dream big, strategize boldly, and take actions fearlessly. Our voices are powerful and our demands are clear. The Youth Forum, as well as the People's Forum, are not just about discussions. This is about building a movement. And we are here today because we refuse to accept a world where inequality, injustice, and environmental destruction are a norm. This is not just about sustainable development. It's about fundamental transformation of our economic and social systems. It's about dismantling the structures of oppression and replacing them with justice, equity, and collective power. The system is failing us. And if we don't fight to change the system, who will? So let's shift the power and let's reclaim justice for the people. Thank you, and I hope to see you all at the People's Forum.
I'd like to thank Joy
Good morning, everyone. It is an honor
for shedding light on the whole APR-SEM process and emphasizing the core value that drives People's Forum. So last but not the least, we have Siva, who will talk about centering gender equality in meaningful youth engagement and realizing the 2030 agenda. So over to you, Siva.
Thanks, Palden. Good morning to everyone. And of course, it's privilege and pleasure to address the opening of the APFSD Youth Forum. Arrow is a proud co-convener of this youth forum since 2017, and the APFSD Youth Forum has become over the years, I think, the most anticipated youth convening in the region. And this year alone, we saw something like 2,125 applicants coming from 46 different countries, some interestingly outside of this region. So that tells you how much in demand this space is, of which we've had now today more than 150 applicants joining us. And then we've also have something like 428 online participants, though all of them may not be online at the same time due to time differences. And we also have young people who have selected to bring together their abstracts and their innovations to share with other young people in the room as well. So the SDGs is the key international framework, which has been agreed to by governments. I know that earlier Sangeet talked about the Millennium Development Goals, but the Millennium Development Goals were not like kind of mutually agreed upon by governments and very often seen as an imposition of the UN system upon member states. So somewhere in 2015, government said, no, we want to decide what the development agenda should look like for our part of the region. So the development agenda framework is, of course, has been an enterprise of the multilateral system. And in the 90s, you had the large conferences of, Nairobi on human settlements, you had Rio on environment, you had Cairo on population and development, and you had Beijing on women's rights and equality. And then, of course, in the year 2000, we had the MDGs. And then in 2015, we had the SDGs come about. And of course, the SDGs then seemed as the most ambitious thing ever, never to leave anyone behind. But as I think that, since it started, so many things have happened, including a pandemic, several economic crises, and now perhaps a technology AI crisis. And perhaps, we are actually standing at a time where more people may get left behind as compared to less. But we are at a pivotal moment in time. We have 5 years away from accomplishing this 2030 agenda. And as I think the earlier Assistant Secretary General talked about, is that last year we had the Summit of the Future. And I think we also had an Asia-Pacific process for that, the Asia-Pacific Regional Consultation ahead of the Summit of the Future. And some of you were part of it, and you participated in Summit of the Future and brought our regional recommendations forward as well. As part of the Summit of the Future, you had Pact for the future. And of course, this year we are also seeing two other key conferences taking place. One is the World Summit on Social Development. And as we talk about the SDG goals and the indicators, at the very beginning in 2015, there was a set of recommendations which were called the means of implementation. So it was not just about accomplishing certain indicators, but there was a means of implementation framework for every goal. So at the World Summit on Social Development, these means of implementation will be further unpacked and discussed as well. And of course, another process that is also underway, because I guess the UN loves nothing better than creating processes for everyone to participate in. We have the financing for development conversation taking place amongst governments, and this is also an opportune moment, not only to talk about funding that must be made by SDGs, not only by external governments, but by our own governments to fulfill the rights of our own citizens. Right. So all of these processes, whether it's financing for development or means of implementation or pact for the future, are all intertwined with the SDG processes. And as I think the previous speaker spoke about, I don't want to say that, the SDGs are like my fitness goals, 2 steps forward, 3 steps back. So that seems to be very similar to where we are. But young people in the Asia Pacific region, you are a powerful force because there are more than 1 billion young people in our part of the world, and you're the largest group in the world, right? So it is very critical for your voices to be heard and your priorities to be reflected at the regional and global development agendas. So despite even if we have something huge, whether it is the World Conference documents or whether we have Agenda 2030, these are ambitious agendas, right? And what we have realized is that sometimes, the progress is far from reality, from the goals that we have set ourselves. And we are living in very challenging contexts. And I think that you all know that. We are seeing some of the greatest inequalities the world has ever seen, because we are seeing, trillionaires who can travel to Mars, and yet many poor people do not even have public transport to travel to their place of work. Right? We're also seeing some of the gravest human rights injustices in the world, where communities are even denied basic things like water and land and homes. So despite all of our technological advances, we continue to see the very old situation of starvation, hunger, illness, death, and disability across the world. And at the same time, we're also living in this region where we are seeing very, very complex climate challenges, right? And many of our countries are climate vulnerable, and droughts, typhoons, floods are an everyday reality for many of us. These repeated cycles of floods and disasters continue to impoverish the most marginalized and the most poor and the most vulnerable communities living in these areas. Hence, we have our work cut out for us. So whilst chasing development goals and indicators, we have to consider whether the systems we operate in are useful and facilitate the goals that we want to achieve. So, and from that, all we know, and I think all of you young people know, the system is broken. The structures are designed to keep people out as compared to include people, and institutions are not accountable. So in the past, strong people's movements were essential to check the power of governments, of authoritarian persons, and transnational corporations. And it is evident from these that those who can capture power usually capture power with the aim of capturing resources of the state. And I am sure that you have all seen this unfold in your society and in your context in different ways, right? So for us as citizens to be able to check the power of states, we have used human rights standards, we have used human rights frameworks, and we have used solidarity and movement building in order to do that. So none has been more evident than in SDG 5 on gender equality. So we know that for SDG 5, in this region, it is one of the goals that is very far behind, and 55% of countries still lack laws on equality and non-discrimination against women and girls. So can we progress as a community, as a country, or even as a global society if we are to leave behind 50% of the world? So the women's movement has been working on the agenda of development, equality, and women's rights for many decades, right? And as such, we can learn that this work is going to be continuous. Even the work of the SDGs, well, 2030 is not going to be the end. 2030 is probably going to be the start of the work, and in that we know that we need to do continuous work to fulfill our dreams and goals of equality and rights. And when will our work be done? I guess in many parts of this one we have in projects, right? What are the milestones of progress? When will our work be done? So in the past, we used to say, when the margin comes to the center, this is when our work will be done. So as far as inclusion is concerned, we know that processes and countries have ensured that women, young people, persons with disabilities, LGBTQ groups, indigenous groups are brought to the table and are part of the discussions. But beyond that, we have to look at inclusion in a very much bigger way, to ask critical questions. If we upended the development model, and what if we built development from a child's perspective, from the perspective of an indigenous person, from a disabled person's perspective, from a woman's perspective, from a young person's perspective? Where would you put your resources? Where would you put society's money? Where would you put your social capital in? Hopefully, in these next few days, you will get that opportunity to ask these questions and to answer these questions and say, what does development look like if we were going to build a completely different world? So I hope you have an exciting 2 to 3 days ahead of you, but it's only the beginning of the process because you will then have to go and tell older people of your agenda, and then the people's movement has to go to the Intergovernmental Forum in order to make your voices heard. So I wish you all the very best.
All right. Thank you, Siva, for talking about what has happened, what will happen, and what to expect, and also highlighting the importance of gender equality in our region, and also highlighting the critical role youths play in all of this process. All right, so that is it from all our speakers. A huge round of applause to our speakers. Yay. All right, now it's your turn. If you have a question, please raise your hand. And I'd like to request the team to be ready with the mic. Okay. And before you ask the question, please introduce yourself, where you're from, and keep the question brief so that we can have as many questions as we can. All right. I saw a hand up there. I'm sorry. I'll be next. You're next.
Hi, I'm Samiksha from Nepal, and I have a question. Like, how youth across the Asia Pacific region continue to face barriers in accessing decision-making space. So we all know this, and particularly in policy implementation and accountability, how can international organizations and regional mechanisms like APFSD strengthen the youth participation beyond consultation, ensuring meaningful inclusion in decision making and implementation at all the levels? This is my question for the like, ma'am. Okay, for the forum. Thank you.
I think this question is directed to any one of you. Oh, we'll take additional questions as well. Okay, all right.
Hello, everyone. Buenos dias, mabuhay. I am James from the Philippines, and I would like to ask a question regarding the debate between systemic change and individual change. There were speakers earlier who emphasized on the role on changing the system, that is, to, to transform power structures that we are right now. However, at the same time, other speakers emphasize on building individual responsibility so that we can orient them towards social transformation. So given that areas of contention earlier between systemic change and individual change, how will it be possible to balance those two for a compromise when attaining the 2030 agenda?
I will take one last question.
Hello, good morning, everyone. I'm Kelsey, also from the Philippines. This question is addressed to any of the speakers. Just to build up on what James raised, um, s- often the SDGs could come off blind to structural and systemic defects. My question would be, if the SDGs do not question the circumstances of inequalities, they land into an ideal world scenario. My question is, are we seeing alternatives? And how do we go about this? How do we move forward? Thank you.
All right, speakers, whenever you're ready.
These, I'm not sure. Is it working? Can you hear me? All right, great. So these are excellent questions. So first off, thank you. And I appreciate all the thought that goes into these. Is it working?
Check,
Is it
check.
quiet? Oh, I think it's louder now. I hear it better. Okay. I think the volume got turned up. So I wanted to say first, thank you. These are excellent questions, and I am not about to say I have the answers. I have some thoughts, right? Because I think they're very big, and I hope that you also discuss them amongst yourselves. Because the idea is that with more of your participation, more of your thoughts, more of your priorities, we learn about how to better and more meaningfully engage youth in these processes, speaking to the question about the intergovernmental process for APFSD, for example. Every year we're iterating. We're trying to find different ways to test and see what works, what feels like it's actually meaningful, how we can add more opportunities for youth engagement. We will have many more scholars and youth activists present at the forum this year than we have in the past. So this is one step we're taking, and we welcome the feedback on how we're doing and how we can find different ways to engage. During the forum, the lead up to the forum to me is this right here. You're in it, right? The engagement towards that, the call to action. And then post forum, where you have your national alliances, where we can potentially link with some of the work that's happening from the UN level. For example, on the voluntary national review process, where countries are already voluntarily looking at how things are going with the SDG implementation. That's a very nice opportunity. So this is one thing we can explore as well. It's not perfect, but we are open to hearing your suggestions because we want your voices, your perspectives, and your ideas about how to better and more meaningfully engage young people in these processes. And then towards the systemic and individual, I think we need both. So I think that's there is a tension, but there's also a coming together. I think there's a lot of tension and paradox in life, and that's where there's some beauty, right? It's not an easy and clear cut, it's complex. But all of you today have individual actions that you're doing on a daily basis. We see some of them out there already. And coming together are building collaborations, potentially even movements for more systemic change. So I think it happens at a variety of levels. And it's, to me, inspiring to see all of you together because you also have your networks. You'll take your messages back to your calls, your perspectives, and the momentum builds. And these discussions continue at the individual, community, and larger level.
Hi.
Can you hear me? It's fine? All right. Okay, great. So the first question on inclusion of young people and meaningful participation of young people. I think it occurs on so many different levels. Okay, firstly, I need to say that nobody's going to give you the power. You'll have to grab it for yourself. And that's the first lesson I can tell you. I mean, you can be invited to a table, but it is also up to you in order to, that's a job I do, right? I mean, like, even if I attend a meeting, then I have to have the follow-up meetings with either governments or with other stakeholders, and I have to continue the agenda, right? And that's part of the process. It is, I wish it was a world where I could go to the government and say, hey, pass this law. And then they say, yeah, what a great input, Seva. I'm going to pass that law just like you asked. So, yeah, so sometimes you have to go again and again and again. And for those who have been involved in processes that, involve even passing a much needed law. You will know that I think in the Philippines, you took 10 years to pass the reproductive health bill by taking it again and again and again. So we cannot stop, and I wish it was so easy that governments are so receptive to listen to us, but they're not. And that's because it goes back to the question on systemic and structural inequality in society, which, the other question was about. I think that one of the things that the SDGs is devoid of is the question of power, right? Because it is power manifested in society, which has created many of the conditions that may perpetuate poverty and inequality. Right. And this comes from the history of our countries. There's not only, of course, there's a legacy of colonialism, which we all know about, but also within our own societies, that whether there were monarchs, whether there were systems of different sorts of elites, taking state capture. And then through the modernization of the country, that elitism has then permeated into other things like government jobs or corporate jobs. And, so the elites perpetuate their status, right? And this is evident in all of our countries, right? So how do we check that power, right, is the question that we need to look at. And so this power, it kind of like, how do I say it, metamorphosizes, from one to another, but it's all similar groups that have come into, right? So this is why I think, the earlier speaker from APRSM talked about the people's movement. What is the people's agenda? What does development look like for us as compared to what does development look like for the elites of our society, right? So these are the things that we need to think about. I think on the question of systems and, systemic change and individual change, both I think are needed as, but also the thing is, both need to go hand in hand, because individuals cannot change the world. Systems also need to change. So, the individual needs to work with a group or a community in order to make that change. I feel one of the things that perhaps is very different from previous generations is that in your generation, you face this burden of the individual, because you've been made to believe that, success is very much dependent on you and you alone, but that's not true. And so previously, I think in my generation, it used to be said that, it takes a village to raise a child. I mean, it takes a village to raise one child. Okay. So, so the thing is, like, your failure is not your sole failure, and your success is also then not your sole success. So you need to build a community that enables the success of the agenda, so, and I think that part of that community is going from individual to group, and from group to a larger community, and from the community to be absorbed into a people's movement of sorts, right? So I think that that's my 2 cents.
All right, so we have one question from our virtual participant. Judy, would you like to?
Yes. So we have a question from Jishan, who says, how can we bring young people equal partners in decision making and policy making processes in countries of conflict zones, and especially marginalized communities and poor democracies? How to make them a part of the journey of Agenda 2030?
Since I'm on the roll, okay. I think that, see, again, I feel like there's just so much of pressure on young people to say, hey, you young person from the conflict zone, get along the bandwagon and join the Agenda 2030. And not only that, you need to be an equal partner. I think it is, we can expect that at country level, those structural and systemic barriers will be there to prevent us from being able to put forward our agenda, one, and two, whether our agenda is going to be taken seriously or not, right? Because I mean, like, from the women's movement, I can tell you, and I'm sure young people, right? So anytime I say anything, I say, oh, well, what do you expect? She's a woman. Of course, she's going to talk about gender equality, and just like that, young people, they'll say, oh, you young people, what do you all know? I mean, of course, young people talk like this only about idealistic. When they grow older, they also will get along with our train, right? I mean, so how do we stop people from trivializing it? The point is, we can't stop other people's reactions. All we can do is we can make sure that we keep getting included. So one of the things I say, like, hey, you haven't invited us to that meeting. Why have you not invited us? Come, I will come to that meeting. Don't worry, okay? So, so I think keep inviting yourself into conversations, get into rooms that people are trying to keep you out of. That's important. So you need to have a very thick skin. So grow a thick skin. That'll help you great deal. And then the last thing I can say is never give up, because people do not want to listen to you, but you just force them to listen to you.
Just to add to that, I think being realistic around the contexts that you're in as well. So similarly, there's very high expectations, but the context, especially if we're talking about countries in conflict or countries where there are huge systemic barriers, I think it's important to also keep this in mind. We're talking about a very diverse region in Asia and the Pacific. So that is where also sharing the lessons that you as youth advocates, as scholars, as individuals can, these kinds of forums, these kinds of opportunities to also build the networks that can help you open the doors, learn about those meetings, continue to invite yourself, or say that you're willing to participate, to propose, to find constructive ways to add. I think it's important to consider the context, but also the networks that you can create in events like this and keep those alive. So that's also something that takes energy and effort. But I think you are all even better than I would even know at staying connected, leveraging the tools that are available to do so and keep that alive and build some of that power that comes with having that community and building it.
I just wanted to add one more. I think that those who are in the environmental movement, I mean, you will know about this terminology, common but differentiated responsibilities, right? Yeah. So young people, you also have to know common but differentiated responsibilities, because sometimes people in development sector will say, the adolescent girl, she is at the forefront of social change. Really? Why would we put the burden on this adolescent girl to be on the forefront of social change? So we have to question the things, right? So young people, you just have to say, you older people, you had all the time and you had all the money. What do you do with your responsibility as compared to making us primarily responsible for taking care of an environment, right? So put the responsibility back to governments, put the responsibility back to the larger organizations, because these the governments, the organizations were supposed to serve you, right? Not to make you the agent of responsibility. So understand what is your role, right? But because, I mean, I generally believe young people are greatly responsible and have a perhaps a greater social conscience than previous generations that have come before them. So I think that that's something you can use.
All right, that is the end of the Q&A session. I hope you have, no, not hope, but I understand that you probably have a lot of questions you want to ask. Siva and Juliet here, they'll be here for some time, so you can go personally to them and then, grind them with all your questions. So this is the end of our first, well, not first, our second session. Thank you everyone for being a good listener. And of course, thank you speakers for sharing your insights